It was the dawn of the third age of podcasting, 30 years after the series had launched.
The Babylon podcast was a dream given form. Its goal, to discuss the place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully.
It's a port of call, home away from home for established fans, newbies, Jon, Blaine, and guests.
Humans and aliens wrapped in 2,500,000 tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night.
It could be a dangerous place.
Wait, what?
But it's our last, best hope for peace.
This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations.
The year is 2024.
The name of the podcast is
Babylon 5, 30 years later.
Welcome to Babylon 5, 30 years later, the show where we look at each episode and movie for Babylon 5, typically on the 30th anniversary of the original broadcast. And when I say we, that's myself, Blaine Dowler, and my co-host, John M. Wilson. How you doing, John?
I am awake and ready to talk about some Babylon 5, as long as you're not here to take over the show, because we're going to have words.
Yeah, but no, this has been a partnership from the start. But yes, in case people needed that little hint, we are looking at A Voice in the Wilderness Part 2, which makes sense since we did Part 1 last week. This was directed by Janet Greek and written by J. Michael Straczynski. So these names have both shown up repeatedly. The episode has a few guest stars. So there's Louis Turenne, who's playing Varn. We saw him last week. So we have Kurt Loewens back again from last week. Really, it's a lot of the same guest cast as last week. Louis Turenne was Draal, and Kurt Loewens is Varn. It's Ron Canada is the main new one, playing Captain Ellis Pierce. The next one is a bit of a spoiler, so if you haven't already watched the episode, pause, watch the episode. Do not read the credits that come in after the main credits, because they will have that same spoiler. But in the last few minutes, we meet Lise Hampton, played by Denise Gentile.
Yes.
And Aki Aleong returns as Senator Hidoshi. So in terms of the regular cast, we do see Sinclair, Ivanova, Garibaldi, and Franklin, as we often do. And then we also see Delenn and Londo, as far as the ambassadors are concerned.
I did notice that we were light on ambassadors in this two-parter.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that. Some of that, though, I don't know how easily you could have gotten more into the story, because we often have A, B, and C plots. This barely has a B plot. Really, the A plot picks up where we had last week, where something massive was coming through the jump gate. And it turns out that is the Hyperion. It's an Earth Force vessel that was sent to take command of the situation. But Sinclair is saying, I don't know who gave you that order, but the president told me I am in charge of this sector. And until he hears otherwise from the president himself, that's the way he's going to handle it. So there's a bit of friction between himself and Captain Pierce. Captain Pierce is ready to go down to that planet and get that technology, because Earth Force is hungry for advanced technology after the shellacking they got in the Earth-Minbari War. If the Minbari had not needlessly surrendered for reasons we don't yet know.
Why do they think it's going to be advanced weapons technology? It could be just like a better way to make spaghetti noodles. You never know with these things.
You don't. And there wasn't guaranteed it was going to be weapons, but they figured there's definitely advanced technology based on the strength of the beacon. So even if it wasn't designed as weapons, they could probably use it to advance Earth technology so that they would be more competitive in the next war. And of course, other species would probably have the same idea if they knew what was down there. Delenn does, because Varn has appeared to Draal, asking for help as well. Londo knows something is up. When he presses Ivanova to find out what it is, she gives him the accurate, if vague, description, boom, 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 because there is a failsafe. And with Varn dying, there's nothing controlling the vessel, and it is blowing itself to pieces. Or the planet. So if this planet blows up, it's going to take Babylon 5 with it. Because B5 is in orbit, and it has some limited control, but that's about maintaining a stable orbit. It does not have the power to leave and go somewhere else.
It's a giant station. So even if it did have the power, getting accelerated and everything else would be a huge deal. But yeah, it's not meant to move. It is near the planet. If that planet goes the way of Alderaan, it's taking the station with it.
Yep. So eventually they're able to stabilize the situation because Delen's mentor Drawl volunteers to take Varn's place. So he will operate the machine to keep things stable, keep things peaceful, with the instruction that, okay, we've done this, now stay off this planet. I say eventually because there's issues where, Pierce is trying to send ships down that are getting destroyed by the automated defense systems. Sinclair bluffs for time, claiming that you need a jamming device that is currently in for repairs, which, of course, is not at all true, but it does buy them time. After the situation is resolved, Pierce does get notification that, Sinclair is right. He does have the President's authority to stay in complete command of this sector. So Pierce, I don't know, he was overstepping his bounds, but the person who gave him the orders to do that was the one who really messed up. Pierce received orders. Captains outranked commanders. He had no reason to believe he was in the wrong when he arrived. So there is a little bit of a B-plot with Londo trying to figure out what's going on. When he does eventually find out, it's because Varn appears to him, and he helps Delen and Drawl take care of the situation by piloting the shuttle that gets them down and gets Drawl installed. With Varn out of the machine, it's implied, but people were asking online, so I'll just put the notes here. Yeah, Varn is the one who told them how to safely get back to their shuttle and get off the planet, because he was with them and familiar with the situation. The B-plot in this is that President Santiago is escalating military presence on Mars with the revolt going out, which has Garibaldi incredibly concerned because Lise Hampton, the woman he loves, is still on that planet. Sinclair becomes aware of the situation and uses his authority to finally get Garibaldi a channel through. So there was concerns about the fate of Lise Hampton last time because she wasn't on the list of people who were safe. Turns out she was wounded, but it's a minor wound. She was expected to make a full recovery. So the much bigger problem for Garibaldi is that in the time since he left Mars, she has fallen in love and gotten married to someone else. So reconciliation does not appear to be an option on the table.
Which is sad. Because Michael's been holding out for her, even though they had ended on a bad note. But we could talk more about that.
Yeah. But anyway, I think that's the basics of the recap. Did I miss anything that's jumping out to you?
No, that hits all the highlights. This was a lot more of a plot-driven episode than they have tended to be. And I find myself not having a whole lot to say about it. I will say some things, I'm sure, but it just is, it's a very mechanical story, if that makes sense. The other guy showed up, went down to the planet, things didn't go well. Turns out the commander was right. They installed the guy. They was just kind of like boom, 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 and it all fell out. I don't say I didn't enjoy it at all, because I did enjoy it as I was watching it. But I'm wondering about, I don't know, character depth and interactions and that sort of thing didn't jump out at me nearly as much.
Yeah, this wasn't about adding depth and layers to characters as much as just showing what we already know about the characters in a new context while everything is hitting the fan. As you're saying, yeah, this is one of the more plot-heavy episodes. Also one of the more action-heavy episodes that we've had so far.
Which was good. There a lot of the shots, going down to the planet, the defenses and stuff. That laser beam that vaporizes 4 ships in a row. There's good stuff there.
Oh yeah, it is very engaging, but I think you're right. There's a little bit where we learn just a bit more about Londo than we knew before. When he's sort of reliving his younger glory from when he led a particular military operation for the glory of the Centauri Empire. Although I assume the Narn would have a different view of that particular mission.
Yeah, probably. Speaking of Narn, we don't have, it's worth pointing out, we don't have any Jakar in this episode.
Yeah, there's no Jakar and there's no Kosh. Nor are there the assistants. So no Linear, no Natoth, no Veer. But again, as you said, this is very plot heavy. So I can't even think of which moments we would need to sacrifice to fit them in.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you would have to create another storyline to work them in, because I don't know that just having them as part of any of the other conversations, just like they're contributing, really means a lot for their role on the station. There's nothing for them to do. It's just, it feels weird because it's a big episode. It's a 2-part episode. So there's a lot going on. We're creating, new dynamics for the series. We're moving forward with some things, and you don't have everybody on the playground.
Yeah, but again, there is so much going on. I don't know how we could have meaningful appearances of the other ambassadors without making this a 3-parter. We could have the cursory ones. I'm thinking of episodes of Voyager where Chakotay's entire set of dialogue is shields up.
That being said, the episode was good. I enjoyed... Okay, so first particular plotline I was thinking of was the presence of Drawl and how he seemed so inconsequential last episode. And really he was basically the Deus Ex Minbari at the end of the episode. We had no idea who this character was, but he served the purpose at the end of the story. And we obviously knew who he was, but he wasn't anybody we knew before we started the 2-parter, and he saves the day at the end.
That's true. Yeah, he was introduced as the mentor to Delenn, but we never really got to know him in any other context. So there was a little bit of exposition there, but not much.
I think the idea of evacuating the station, whenever that came into the storyline, I was reminded of Deep Space Nine, where they've evacuated the station on a number of occasions in the early episodes just because they needed to limit their cast or whatever. Example, season 2 opens with a 3-parter, huge dramatic, the Circle trilogy, where the station is evacuated, everyone gets moved off, it's all dramatic, and everyone comes back at the end of the story, you assume, because they resolve the difficulties. And then episode 4, which is the next story, starts with, we had to evacuate the station because of this and this and this. And they only have a half dozen of their cast in the episode. So, obviously, it's a TV show. You can have people in front of the camera or not super easily. But the fact that evacuating Babylon 5 seemed like it would have been a huge ordeal just gave that more weight, I think. A more appropriate amount of weight.
Yeah. Babylon 5 is a more populated station than Deep Space Nine to start with. Like by a full order of magnitude, so the maximum population of Babylon 5 is about 10 times greater than the population of Deep Space Nine. In Deep Space Nine, I can accept that it's easier to evacuate because Bajor is right there. So they are not orbiting a planet previously thought dead. Deep Space Nine is orbiting a planet with spacefaring technology. So when they call for evacuation, because it's a Bajoran station and the Federation is just there to help with operations, I assume that they can get a whole bunch of Bajoran shuttlecraft coming up to help ferry everyone down to the planet's surface. But Babylon 5 doesn't have that luxury. There's no place nearby to go.
Deep Space Nine had more resources for fewer people, and Babylon 5 would take a lot more evacuating with not nearly as much evacuation capital.
Exactly. Right. They've got a few fighters. They've got some transports. There's the commercial vessels that are docked there. But where do they go? Right. Everyone is going to have to leave that sector. And without Babylon 5 to open the jump gate, here with the Hyperion is big enough it can open its own jump gates. But if it's Babylon 5 on its own, you would need to have someone on the station opening the jump gate for all the evacuating vessels to go through. And as they said, every available ship is not enough to hold everyone on board. This is a Titanic level evacuation problem. Hopefully better managed where they're not sending ships out half full.
The visiting captain, Ellis Pierce, played by Ron Canada. We only ever see him on view screen, right? The entire episode?
There was one part in the teaser early on when he and Sinclair first meet where they are together.
Okay. It reminded me of The Wrath of Khan, in that Khan and Kirk have this huge dynamic interplay throughout the film. And yet they're never on stage together. They're only interacting through view screens. They never actually get seen face to face in the entire movie.
Yeah, I don't even know if Shatner and Montalban interacted during the filming.
Like if the actors even ever like said hi and had coffee.
Yep. It has happened sometimes when they were bringing on Jenna Louise Coleman as a new companion on Doctor Who, and she actually appears in a special prior to coming on as companion. Matt Smith didn't know that, because everything she filmed sort of in isolation. So he knew the whole script. He didn't know who was going to be playing this person until it hit the air.
We were just watching the episode of Sandman that she's in as Joanna Constantine. Jenna Coleman's pretty great.
Yep. Anyway, speaking of Ron Canada, for those who are not as familiar with him, you might know him from Next Generation. He played Martin Benbeck in one episode. After this, he would go on to an episode of Deep Space Nine. He actually did a really good job in 3 episodes of the Orville. He was in an episode of Voyager, an episode of The X-Files. I can't think of any TV shows or movies where he had the lead, but he's done guest appearances in a huge number of TV series or small parts in movies.
Do you have his Next Generation episode in front of you? Is it the Drumhead?
It is the Masterpiece Society.
Okay.
Season 5, episode 13.
I can't remember that one as well. There's this one episode called The Drumhead. I'm sure you remember it. It's the one where they begin to think there's a Romulan conspiracy and Picard is helping, try to root it out. But then by the end of the episode, it becomes kind of a witch hunt storyline. And Picard is put on the stand as well. And there's this other admiral who's there to help witness proceedings. And the prosecuting admiral goes so over the top and irrational in her diatribe that the visiting admiral just stands up and walks out. So the man has no lines. He walks in, he sits down, he walks out in protest. And picturing him in my head, he looks like Ron Canada. But I wasn't sure if that was him, and I guess it's not.
No, not as far as the IMDb is concerned anyway. So they don't list him for that episode.
It's a non-speaking role. It's entirely possible he's not even credited.
Yeah, but at this point, for someone with a resume the size of Ron Canada's, they'd have him listed as uncredited.
True. So, trying to think of who else. There was a really great moment between Sinclair and Garibaldi that I want to save for The Last Best Hope. Ivanova is once again harping on the complete despairing, bleak outlook on life that is Russian philosophy and culture.
Yeah.
Varn had more to do in this. I'll be curious to see if we see him again. I don't think we will, of course, because, death and all that. But his people, I'm guessing his people are going to play a role because, hello, we have this planet. And we've been told to stay off. And something tells me that whenever you are ordered to keep out of the planet that lives right next door to you, that is the opening up a plot idea for future stories where we don't stay off the planet that is right next door to us. It's just my guess.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that a little more in Giving Form to the Dream. But yeah, it's a reasonable guess.
You warned me about the spoilers in the credits, and I honestly thought we were going to be spoiled on some appearing recurring character or major development or something. And just the fact that Elise Hampton survives at the end of the story was, I was amused because it wasn't nearly the level of spoiler that I was kind of expecting.
Yeah, I guess I could have built that up, but still, given that at the end of the previous episode we didn't know if she was alive or not, then knowing that she's in this one can kind of give you that out. And the fact that she appears at all would tell you that, yeah, she's not only alive, but Garibaldi will get the chance to talk to her.
And that the entire dramatic crux of Garibaldi's story in this is Lisa alive or not? So yeah, having her in the opening credits was an interesting choice.
Yeah, it is a bit of a union issue. There's an episode of The X-Files in which Nick Lee, who plays Krychek, appears starting at the 5-minute mark, but he has to be a character in the background in disguise. He doesn't want people to know it's him. So the viewer, ideally, doesn't know Krychek is involved in the story until after the last commercial break. And Nick Lee fought with his agent and the union to have his credit pulled out of the opening credits, where it should be by union rules, and put into the closing credits to avoid spoiling that. So he did that successfully, but it was not an easy fight, which is good because didn't help with everyone. I know I was part of the one of the regulars of the alt.tv did an X-Files news group, and some of, especially female participants there, were very, very focused on Nick Lee as Krychek, to the point that they recognized his body language. So, I didn't go to the news group until after I'd watched the episode, once it started to air somewhere, but I'd go there, and like at the 7-minute mark in the first time zone it aired in, there's people going, "Oh my God, that's Krychek in the background, that guy with the beard. I recognize the way he walks." So yeah, it's very difficult to pick him out, but some are like, "Nope, that's Nick Lee's walk. Krychek is in this. He's right there."
That's funny.
Yeah, ideally for story purposes, the Lise Hampton credit would not have appeared until the closing credits. But because of the number of lines she had, union rules say it's in the opening. And that's not necessarily a fight you want to put up.
No, you don't want to diminish somebody's role unless there's some mutually agreed upon situation that serves the overall structure of the series or whatever. I have seen, was it an episode of a TV show or something where somebody showed up towards the end of the episode or the end of the story, and literally after they showed up, their credit came on screen, also featuring somebody as somebody. I can't remember at all where I saw that now, but I remember that happening in my life at some point.
I think you might be thinking of the episode of Doctor Who that was right before the 50th anniversary special, where John Hurt turns around and, with a few seconds left, it pulls up and introducing John Hurt as the Doctor.
Yes, I think that's exactly what it was.
Yeah, so spoilers for people who haven't caught up that far in Doctor Who, but yeah, that may have been right around the peak of the series. I think that 50th anniversary special was probably the best Doctor Who has ever been. Looking forward to the 60th anniversary that we will have already, no, we won't quite have already seen it. Yeah, we will have already seen it by the time anyone hears this.
Yeah, this is going to be spring, summer of 24, and the 60th anniversary is the year we're recording this because this is our first recording of 2023.
Yes. So we are recording in January 2023 about an episode that aired on August 3rd, 1994. So at this point, we'll be 10 months past the 60th anniversary, and we'll be talking about whatever they're planning for 61, which I'm guessing is going to be much less extravagant. In any event, so did you have any other thoughts for League in Session?
I'm not sure that I do, which I'm a little bit disappointed in myself as, because, normally I have this list of story bits and stuff. But like I said, this just kind of moved almost predictably, which is not a word I like to associate with Babylon 5. But yeah, we just kind of went through things as they needed to happen.
Yeah, I think after watching part 1, if you were asked to guess how things were going to turn out, you may not guess all the connecting points in between, but the broad strokes, you'd probably make some fair predictions. So there's small surprises, not big surprises.
I think especially after the opening teaser for this one, where the other captain shows up and says they're taking over, I think it becomes really easy to predict how things are going to go from there.
Yeah. Doesn't mean it's not enjoyable, but yeah, the surprises are small. They're not big. All right. So what would you say is your last best hope then?
So it's a Sinclair moment, as it often is. Sinclair is talking to Garibaldi. Oh my gosh, I might actually be getting choked up at this. Hold on. Sinclair is talking to Garibaldi, and he says that, if we have to evacuate women, ambassadors, children, the usual stuff that you say. And then he says, and make sure Ivanova is on the last boat out. You know that Lieutenant Commander Susan Ivanova is going to go down with the ship if anyone has to. And Sinclair's like, no, don't let her do that. She has a life. She has a career. And on the one hand, it's removing a little bit of agency from the character, and that's the sort of thing that we don't like to celebrate. On the other hand, yeah, forcing somebody to live their life instead of, go down with the ship unnecessarily. That's not exactly a bad motivation.
Yeah, if you're going to be removing someone's agency, doing it to prevent effectively suicide is one of the ways that we can live with.
Especially an unnecessary suicide. She would stand her post out of a sense of duty, not necessarily out of a reason that is ultimately going to benefit anything.
Yeah, although I'm not sure there's anything other than unnecessary when it comes to suicide, but well, yeah, I suppose, yeah, there's actually a true story starring the actual soldier, but there was a case in World War One where people were commanded to hold this hill against the incoming invasion, and they knew that there was no chance of survival, so the commanding officer told everyone else to evacuate and said, no, I will just stay up here with the 2 machine guns and do what I can. And he actually held the hill.
Yeah, I don't want to get into any discussion on personal choices for ending your life, but I was mainly thinking of things like military tactics or doing something where your death is making something else happen or that sort of thing. That would be the opposite of what I was talking about with Ivanova.
Yeah, there's a difference between stepping in front of a bullet intended for someone else and, like you're saying, that there's a perfectly good escape pod there, but the captain goes down with the ship kind of idea.
Right. What about you?
I actually think it's an Ivanova moment early on, right after Sinclair has one of his communications with Captain Pierce. And when they cut it off, Ivanova's comment is, worst case of testosterone poisoning I've ever seen.
That was great, because it was basically both of the commanding officers basically holding up rulers across the space from each other. It was pretty great.
Yeah, so the other contender was when Ivanova was, giving Malari the summary of what's going down there. She finally says, what's really going on? Boom, 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 boom. Have a nice day. And then Londo walks away thinking he still didn't get a straight answer. Well, no, that's pretty much exactly what's happening down there.
Another great part of that exchange is whenever she says situation is status quo, and he lists all this stuff. He's like, this to you is status quo? You must lead a very interesting life.
Yeah. Yes, I've actually got the quote up on the IMDb. Of course. An Earth war cruiser parked alongside the station. Mysterious trips to the planet beneath us. Rumors that you found someone down there and brought him back here. This to you is status quo. You must lead a very interesting life. Ambassador, you did find something down there, didn't you? Something valuable, perhaps? I wish to remind you that my government has contributed substantial amounts of money to this station. We are entitled to an equal share of anything you find down there. Ambassador, do you really want to know what's going on right now? Yes, absolutely. Boom, 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 boom. Have a nice day.
I feel like the only thing that would make that exchange slightly better is when she says, situation is status quo. The status could not be more quo. Or maybe not better, but I would have said it.
Yeah, although I think that would have tipped the hand that it's not actually status quo, if you push it too much. But yeah, she was great in this one. Another good quote is, so if we go down there, it blows. If we don't, it blows anyway, just a little later. It's a good thing I'm Russian. We're used to hopeless situations.
Yeah, that's the part that I was commenting on earlier. Just the the bleak outlook on life. And it echoes, what's her brains? Romanoff's line in The Avengers. Something, I'm Russian. Well, I used to be Russian.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, from there, I guess we will give form to the dream.
I got spoiled on something.
Okay.
So I went to go see, as you do when we're making this podcast episode, I went to go see the MDib page for the various guest stars to see what else they've been in. And saw that the actress who plays Lise Hampton, this is not her only episode playing Lise Hampton. So Lise Hampton is not a one-off character. She has a role to play.
Yes. At this point, I will not divulge whether those are sort of new continuing story or whether they're flashbacks, but that's true. Lise Hampton will appear on screen again in some sort of time frame.
And the idea that they might be flashbacks hadn't even occurred to me. So yeah, okay.
So there is that. Drawl, now running the machine on Epsilon 3, well, you don't park next to something like this and not refer to it again on a show like Babylon 5. So we will see Epsilon 3 and the Great Machine again, and as of this point, Drawl is running it.
That was the most obvious, setup for the future that I was, thinking about. And like you said, you don't do something like this without it having meaning for the future. So they have changed the layout or the landscape of the show as far as, who's living next door now.
Mm-hmm. So those are the main things we've got established firmly, that Sinclair is in command of this sector regardless of rank. That was something that came down at the very end, that yes, that is still President Santiago's attitude. And, again, we possibly have awakened something within Londo that reminds him of past glories.
Londo likes his past glories. He really, really wants to get back to those past glories.
Yeah, that's really how he's defined himself. All right, so I think that about covers it for Voice of the Wilderness Part 2. So we'll return in a week to talk about Babylon Squared. So apparently we're going to have a Babylon number of Babylons, because that's what squaring means.
Normally, when you have 2 Babylons, that's just like multiplying by 2. That's a coefficient, not an exponent.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah, it's like, someone commented that, people think 3 squared is 6, and then there's all sorts of Twitter replies going, but it is. What are you guys talking about?
Yeah. As a math teacher, that just makes me sad.
Yep. Yes, and we are both math teachers, so.
It's not even complicated math. It's not even like, some weird algebraic something or other. It's just simple arithmetic. What does an exponent notation mean? How do you interpret this higher little numeral next to a larger numeral? Okay.
Yeah, the 2 is written in a superscript and on the other side of the variable, so that should tell you it is something different. But anyway, so next week we will be looking at Babylon Squared, which is episode 20 out of 22 for this season.
We're coming up on another break soon, and not a season break because of, reasons.
Yeah, we'll see. Babylon Squared and Quality of Mercy will be our next 2 episodes coming out in the next 2 weeks. They originally aired on August 10th and 17th, 1994. And now P10, which was the network that this was on, it was Warner Brothers' first attempt to have their own network, they decided to do things differently. So instead of having the big dramatic cliffhangers end the season in April or May and make people wonder what's going to happen and, sit there in anticipation for months and months, they decided to air them right before the new season started, so that when people watch them, they go, ooh, and they'd definitely be there for season 2, instead of leaving over the summer. This was the logic, as such as it was.
Do you think it indicated a lack of faith in the show? Because we'd already had where Picard gets turned into a Borg. What's that episode called?
Best of Both Worlds.
Best of Both Worlds. Best of Both Worlds, which had viewers so psyched for more Star Trek that the season 4 opener, the resolution of Best of Both Worlds, beat out the football game that week in the ratings. Like, that's how excited people were to finish that story. And maybe they just, weren't thinking that Babylon 5 was going to generate an appropriate level of excitement between the finale of the season and the beginning of the next.
If this scheduling policy was unique to Babylon 5, then I would say that could well be a factor. But that's how P10 scheduled all their shows. So, spoiler alert, after the 3rd season of Babylon 5, JMS is going to be told, you're only going to get 1 more season because P10 has failed. And it's going to take 1 year to complete the contracts and let the independent stations who signed up with us leave and break out on their own. So season 4 will be the last season of Babylon 5.
That's why they were curtailed a season. Okay, I knew that happened. I knew that he kind of had to scramble to get his 5-year story told in a 4th year. I did not know that the reason was, nothing to do with the show, really. It was administrative, paperwork stuff instead.
Yeah, so P10 as a network failed. When we get there, we'll go through why they got a season 5 anyway, and how much of the show got reshuffled, because it's actually not as much as a lot of people think. When you got the script books that came out, that volume 15, the red cover volume, that was available for free to those of us who bought the first 14 in a timely fashion.
if you go through that, it's got the original outline, and yeah, there's a lot of the plot lines that are in Season 5 were always intended for Season 5. They just reshuffled, because the episodes of the Season 4 that were intended to set up Season 5 got pushed into the first part of Season 5, and the episodes in Season 5 that were designed to wrap up plotline started in Season 4 got pushed back to Season 4. So he just decided these are the high priority plot lines that we have to close, and there's other stories he didn't start that he was planning to start in Season 4 that ended up starting in Season 5 when they got there.
It's interesting. They moved the mountains, but left all the valleys and rivers and everything in the season because they didn't need those to wrap up the story in Season 4.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, we'll go through that in a little more detail when we get there, but it's all very well documented. So yes, the season finale aired in the US on October 26th, 1994. So a little over 2 months after the second last episode of the season. So we do have plans for content in between. Obviously, mainly another feedback episode. And then we'll also do the first of what we plan to do, a series of deep dives into shows that JMS worked on for more than one script prior to the creation of Babylon 5.
This is one of the, subplots or more minor aspects of this show's layout that I've kind of been excited about, is during these times where we have no episodes for a pretty good chunk, looking at other things JMS has done. So, yeah. Should we go ahead and say now what that's going to be?
Yeah, we could let people know that the first thing we're going to look at is the first series that JMS wrote at least 2 scripts for. He actually wrote 9 scripts for the second and final season of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Yes. So we're going to be getting some look and see what and I haven't actually watched any of those yet as we're recording this now. So looking to see what JMS did in the world of He-Man. That's going to be coming out during that break between the penultimate and final episodes of Season 1.
Yeah, and then down the road we plan to look at other stuff that he worked on. So this will include, She-Ra, The Real Ghostbusters, Jason the Wheeled Warriors, Murder, She Wrote, Jake and the Fat Man. So not necessarily in this order. The rebooted Twilight Zone, which he worked on with Mark Scott Zickery, who was gracious enough to join us when we discussed the episode he wrote a few months back. So, also Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future. So really, we went through his resume and said, what did JMS write at least 2 episodes of prior to doing Babylon 5? And, oh, look, that matches the number of breaks that we have in production. We're close enough to it that with our other ideas, we've got something for every extended break. So our goal is to never take more than 3 weeks off.
Yes, and we're coming up on Season 2, which is where a lot of the tie-ins for Babylon 5 started up. So that's going to be another thing that we do during the breaks, is tie-in fiction, which I'm looking forward to. I love getting into the tie-in fictions whenever I'm exploring franchises.
So there were 11 comics, which I have managed to get my hands on, and I think about 18 novels, which I have not managed to yet get my hands on, but we're working on it. So ideally, we'll be able to get through all of those.
All right.
All right, yes, so these are the plans as we're going through. And we have some other plans for Crusade, because on top of the 13 produced episodes, there are some scripts for unproduced episodes that now John and I both have access to. So after we wrap up Crusade, but before we get to the standalone movies that came out a couple years after, in many cases, 3 years or 4 years after that for those 2, I think we'll be able to slot in discussions of what Crusade could have been before we move on. All right, so yes, the first thing we're going to use to fill that gap is a feedback episode. So you can get in touch with us and provide that feedback that we would love to read on air. Sorry, if it's too spoiler heavy, we might set that aside for a while because we do want to keep this show first viewer friendly.
And me friendly.
Yes, because John is one of those first viewers, so that's the key point. So of the 5 communication methods we are about to list, if you are absolutely compelled to discuss spoilers of things that are coming up, don't do that at johnreadscomics.com. Do it anywhere else. You have 4 other options.
I'm so new to this show that I thought Babylon Squared meant the entire station was going to turn all cubicle like a Minecraft design. But yeah, you can send your feedback lots and lots of ways. One of those is my website that Blaine just mentioned, johnreadscomics.com, where there is no H in squared. And just leave a comment on any of the episode postings there and check out my other podcasts over there.
All of my podcasts are available at bureau42.com. So again, spoilers in the comments there are not going to spoil things for me, because I have seen everything for Babylon 5 on TV at least once. As we just said, I've got the comics which I haven't read yet, and I don't have my hands on the novels yet. But yes, you can post comments about anything that actually broadcast there.
You can also send a review through your favorite podcatcher. Now, we monitor Apple Podcasts because that is very, easy to do, and it's very commonly used. If you leave a review on another podcast medium and you would like us to acknowledge it on the air, please feel free to drop us a line through one of the other messages. Say, hey, I reviewed y'all. You'll give you 1 star over at, podcastorama.com. And we'll say, oh, why only 1 star? And we'll read it and we'll talk about it. I like more stars though, so more than 1 is good.
Yep, and regardless of the rating, especially for reading it, we would like detail. So if you think this is a 1-star podcast, let us know why. And we will incorporate that ideally into the structure of the show, and you'll be able to hear us adapting to those changes 2 or 3 years down the road, because we record with lots of lead time. Now, we also cross-post things to YouTube. We've been talking about the playlists that I've been managing for a while. We have now found that our podcatcher has added a feature where it can cross-post to YouTube automatically for us. So I will still have to go back and manually do the playlist end. But yes, we can now guarantee that every podcast in the feed absolutely will not be missed on YouTube. And that will save me a lot of time. And you can post your comments there.
And I was supposed to leave time for Blaine to talk about emailing us, but I forgot to because I was so eager to talk about my website because I'm just that egotistical. But since we're alternating, I'll just go ahead and say you can also email us at babylon530yearslater at gmail.com. And whenever you're writing that handle, Babylon5 30 years later, for the number 5 and number 30, you can either spell them out with words or use numeral characters. Either way, we have all the emails.
Right. And yeah, that is the variety of ways in which you can easily get in touch with us. If you can figure out where we live, you can try smoke signals, but I don't know about John. I cannot read those. Can you?
I can, but I usually translate them in another language and it gets all confused.
Okay. So yes. And yeah, my semaphore is too rusty. At one point, I actually did know it, but I don't know. At one point, I could actually read barcodes without looking at the numbers on the bottom too. So
okay.
Skills we pick up that we lose because really there's no practical application.
That's pretty great, though.
Well, I said there's no practical application. It actually did come in handy once when the numbers were worn off. The person was in front of us and the barcode wasn't that clear and they couldn't scan it. And they were like waiting for a price check on a very busy day. And I got frustrated and just leaned over and dictated the number. And the cashier typed it in and it was right. And then I got lots of strange looks. But the line started moving again.
Very good.
Yeah, I figure statistically speaking, that was it. That's when I stopped paying attention to it because that was the one time it was going to help in my life. I had gotten through that hump. So, yes, then we're done. So with that, thank you for listening.
And good eating to you.